This is In-Ear Insights, the Trust Insights podcast. Do you want to use AI in your marketing, but you're not sure where to start? Take a class with Trust Insights and the Marketing AI Institute. The AI Academy offers more than 25 classes and certification courses to start you on your AI journey, including our Intelligent Attribution Modeling for Marketers certification. One membership gets you access to all 25 classes. Visit trustinsights.ai/AI Academy to learn more and enroll today. That's trustinsights.ai/AI Academy to enroll today. Are you struggling to reach the right audiences? Trust Insights offers sponsorships in our newsletters, podcasts, and media properties to help your brand be seen and heard by the right people. Our media properties reach almost 100,000 people every week, from the In-Ear Insights podcast to the Almost Timely and In the Headlights newsletters. Reach out to us today at trustinsights.ai/contact to learn more. Again, that's trustinsights.ai/contact. In this week's In-Ear Insights, we're talking about reviewing sort of end-of-year stuff. And one of the things that has come up for ourselves internally is what stuff is worth doing, what stuff is not worth doing. So, Katie, do you want to set the stage in terms of how we're thinking about, like, what podcast should we guest appear on and things like that? It's sort of like where your mind is at for evaluating the efforts that we've been putting into our own marketing for the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So this all came from sort of seeing a little bit of conversation about, your time specifically, Chris. And so you are a known entity in the marketing and technology and data science space. And in my opinion, as the business owner of, with the talent, there should be, some value put on your time. And right now, and we've been able to operate this way for a while just because it's what made sense for the business. But one of the things that we need to figure out moving forward, moving into next year, is when is your time or my time free, and when is there a price tag on it? And so that sort of started this like larger conversation of, that creating value. And, when you're a small business, when you're just starting, you do tend to do more things for free, more things for barter, because it's good for networking, it's good for growing your audience, it's good for demonstrating your capabilities. But at what point do you start to make that transition into, I know that you've gotten these things for free for before, but now you're going to have to pay for it. And that's a tough conversation to have with your longtime audience and your longtime customer base of, now you're going to have to start paying for these things. So that's kind of what we're navigating now, is trying to figure out, what makes sense for us to still give away, and then what things do we have to start gating or charging for in order for us to scale, because we're trying to strike that balance between what's best for us and what's best for our customers. And if what's best for our customers is they get a bunch of stuff for free, great, but then we can never make money in scale. So that's the conundrum. And I know that it's not a unique problem to us. And so, Chris, how are you seeing it?
The way that I've always looked at stuff like this in the past, and this is where really good analytics helps, huge surprise, is to look at the data and see, like, okay, I did a bunch of these podcasts or these shows or whatever the thing is, whatever you're doing, run an attribution analysis. You make sure that if people are doing things like making sure that your links are in their show notes on their podcast. Or whatever, the live stream stuff, so that you can track how much traffic are they sending, and then doing something like our customer journey reporting and looking at the different sources and mediums over time and saying, okay, did this thing move the needle at all? Did it participate even in the slightest conversion? If the answer is no, it had no part in conversion whatsoever, then you have to say, you know what? Then maybe we need to add a little bit more of a gate, put some money on there. On the other hand, if it turns out that it was like, oh wow, so it was brilliant, like, oh yeah, then we should do some more of that. So I'm going to show something. If you're just listening to the audio of this, you can actually go watch this. This is on our YouTube channel. So go to trustinsights.ai/YouTube to find that. And so this is our customer journey report for calendar year 2020. And these are essentially the things that helped conversions on our website. Obviously, newsletters and things like that. But when you start getting into sort of the middle of the pack and, towards the end of the pack there, we see things like the Agorapulse Summit, right? That helped out 19 conversions. That was, we do that for other reasons as well. But even if we didn't, like that would be worth doing again. That seemed to work out. We see some stuff from IBM showing up. Like, hey, that worked out pretty good. We see some stuff from our partner Talkwalker. That blog post that I did for Serena Ehrlich over at Business Wire has participated in 5 conversions. So these are the kinds of things that when I think about what should we do more of or less of, I look at a report like this and go, is it there at all? Now, these are only the top 25. We can dig into the data to see like everything for the year. Because again, we're looking for, did it participate in even one conversion? But if it's not on here, then you'd say, yeah, you know what? That was fun. Enjoyed being there. I'm going to need you to provide some other form of support that makes the value exchange mutual. Because you're right. Our time, your time, if you're listening to this, is valuable. And the time you spend on somebody's podcast is time you could have spent doing something else. So there has to be some kind of exchange of value where you're saying, yeah, my time is valued at X, and I need you to provide something that equates to that.
Now, I would say the alternative to this, so not everybody has the means to run an attribution analysis, and obviously Trust Insights is happy to help you do that. But if you don't, a more stripped down version is, so let's say, for example, Chris, you spent an hour of your time on, somebody's podcast, and let's say that you did 30 minutes of prep, and there was like 30 minutes of email exchanges back and forth getting it all sorted out. So let's say 2 hours total, and then your hourly rate is X. So how much money you've spent, or how much money you've invested in this podcast. When you look at your CRM and you look at your leads and your sales, you should be capturing things like, how did you hear about us, or where did you come from? And when you start to do your analysis of, here are the deals that I've won, here are the ones that I've lost, here are the ones that are in the pipeline, the likelihood, you can even just start to see the sources of where those things came from. And if this particular show, interview, podcast, whatever it is, doesn't show up on the board, then that's problematic. And so that's, without having access to being able to do an attribution analysis, that's a little bit more of a stripped down way to do it, because you should be able to figure out where these leads, where these sales came from. But if you look and you won, a $5,000 deal and your hourly rate is only $200, well, you've made your money back because that investment was worth it. So there's obviously different ways to look at it based on what you have access to do that analysis. But Chris, I absolutely agree with you. There should be some sort of analysis involved, not just a randomly, I'm going to charge you, but I'm not going to charge you, but I'm going to do your thing. You might have a great network. Like, you need to understand where your customers are coming from in order to be able to determine what things are worth your time and what things were not.
I mean, if you want to even get more stripped down, we're like, down like Naked Badger now. Just look at the traffic in Google Analytics by Source Medium. If you did a podcast and within 30 days of that podcast, not a single visitor from your website has come from that show, they probably don't have the juice, right? Because in that podcast, they should have at least put a link to your website in there. By the way, if you go on podcasts and they don't do that, don't go on that podcast. Like, look at the previous episode. If there's no links to previous guests' websites, don't go on the show, because that show is not trading any kind of value whatsoever. But yeah, even just look at your traffic analytics. If they didn't even send you one human being to walk by the front of the store and look at you, then you gave more value than you got.
I agree. And that's definitely, take a look at your referral traffic report. And that's something that we do for ourselves in terms of being that stripped down. Because when we do guest articles or, those guest blog posts, we want to see that is driving traffic back to us. And that's a really good tip, Chris, is that, yes, it's exciting, especially as you're just starting out, to have people noticing you, paying attention and asking for your time. You're like, oh, somebody thinks I have something of value to say. That's pretty exciting for someone who's never had that opportunity before. But keep your head on straight, do your homework, and make sure that the things you're saying yes to are worth your time. And so you're doing your homework ahead of time to say, does this podcast, when they post episodes, post my bio? Does my bio go back to my website? Do they post a link to my website? Do they post the right link to my website? Do I have control over what I'm asking them to put up? Or are they just scraping some, random information about me from 10 years ago that's out of date, and I don't have the opportunity to ask them to update it? So those are the kinds of things that you definitely want to watch out for as you're trying to figure out what is worth my time and what is best for my business.
Another thing you can look at if you are like really vetting, like maybe you're not vetting for yourself, or maybe you're vetting for like a very important personality, so like your CEO, you can go into the analytics of, from Twitter's API, from Instagram, from Facebook. And if it's a show where you pull out, just the data on that show's last 5 or 10 posts, if nobody's engaging with it, then the audience isn't there, right? If you can't even get one person to retweet an episode of a podcast, it's probably a good sign that podcast just doesn't have the juice. On the other hand, if you see a show and it's got good traffic, look into an SEO tool. Put that show's URL into an SEO tool. Do they get any inbound links? Do they get any organic search traffic? How many searches occur every month? Keep it really simple. Go to Google Trends, type in the show name like Marketing Over Coffee or In Your Insights. If nobody searches for it, again, probably not a show that has a lot of juice. And it's an indicator that maybe you want to ask upfront to pay for it. Or, you take the philosophy I have is, you get the first one for free, and then we measure you, and if you come up short, you're going to be not receiving guests in the future without some other form of compensation.
So Chris, the other side of this conversation is, when does it make sense to give away your time for free? And that's a really tough question to answer, because, you could argue that, it's sort of that like karmic universe thing of like, the more you give, the more you get, which is absolutely true. But when you're running a business, you cannot pay your bills with karma, unfortunately. And so we want to make sure that we are getting as much as we're giving. And so, Chris, obviously you've been someone your time has been in demand for much longer than mine. And so for me, it still makes sense to do more free stuff than it does to do paid stuff, but we're starting to make that transition. So I know your philosophy is you get the first one for free, but what if the person doesn't come back and they always, you're always doing these like little one-off free things? How do you know when it's makes sense to do something for free, or how long?
I keep it super simple. And it is, I look at my calendar, right? And I look at my calendar and say, okay, what have I got going on? Is there time enough for it? Now, like when I'm guest appearing on a podcast, that doesn't really require any prep. I don't need to think too hard about it. I send somebody a HubSpot link, and either they book the time correctly or they don't know how to operate HubSpot, in which case definitely don't want to be on their show. And 15, 20, 30 minutes or whatever is done. I said no to this other show that they're like, oh, we need an hour and a half. Like, nope, not happening. I don't have an hour and a half free in my day. I can spare 30 minutes. And they're like, oh, well, our show takes an hour and a half to produce. Like, cool, I can't be there. That's that. Just outright saying no, there isn't enough time in my calendar to permit that. So it really comes down to, at least for me, just common sense judgment. You look at something and go, yeah, I can squeeze that in. Or you look at it and go, no, I just don't have room in the day for that, not with other valuable stuff. Now, again, if you're just getting started out and things like that, you may have the time, right? You may have that bandwidth, in which case, yeah, go for it. Fill up your calendar if you got nothing else going on, or if you're doing it in your leisure time. Like if that's what you do want to do on Saturday night at 7 p.m., go wild.
That's a hard pass for me.
But that would be my starting point: is do I have the time to do this and to do it credibly? Now, the nice thing is that with a lot of shows, they keep asking the same 7 questions over and over again. So I literally, there's no prep whatsoever. The first question is, tell us about your story. Like, could have just copied and pasted the audio from like the other shows I've done this on, but whatever. But after that, the second level is, if you do have the time, there's an old adage from Tom Hopkins selling. I took one of their sales courses years ago, and he exhorts people, and it's good advice. You have to still use judgment, but he always says you must do the most valuable thing possible at any given moment, right? Because a lot of times he's saying to sales guys, you're doing stuff, anything other than selling, spend your time selling. That's the most valuable thing you can do. And so when I look at my time, I look at my to-do list. Are there other things that I could be doing that would be more valuable than the exposure on a relatively unknown podcast? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. If I see like, oh, look, expense reports. Nah, I'm going to a podcast.
Noted. So noted. I expect those on my desk tomorrow, by the way.
I won't forget the cover sheet this time.
And it's interesting because I think that that's a really smart approach of what else do you have going on that, is going to help move your business forward. Now, again, you and I are in very different places in terms of our, I don't know, notoriety, well-knownness, whatever the thing is, whatever you want to call it in terms of, the marketing space. And so obviously when someone says Chris Penn, they know who you are, but when they say my name, they don't necessarily know. And so unfortunately at this point, I need to spend more time building that audience, building that network, if that's what I want, if that's what makes sense for the business. Now, that's a whole other conversation of whether or not having that like large public persona is something necessary in order to move your business forward, or is it just something that is nice to have? For us right now, it definitely makes sense for us to be as known as possible so that people can get to know our services, see what it is that we do. Because to be quite honest, marketing agencies, there's hundreds of them. So how do we stand out? Well, the way we stand out is by who we are and what we bring to the table, our value as people and our unique sets of skills. Just putting that information on a website, not super helpful because you are a dime a dozen with every other marketing agency that's trying to compete for the same amount of business. So I've been taking more of the, unpaid stuff to get my name out there, to get the company name out there. Whereas, you are about a decade ahead of me in terms of that public persona. And so you have more of a leg to stand on to say, I've done these hundreds of things publicly already, you have to pay me for my time. And I think that that's also something that, right out of the gate, if you're saying you have to pay me for my time, but I haven't done anything that I can show you, that's a really tough, pedestal to stand on because there's nothing supporting it.
Exactly. In a lot of cases, and I know this is the case for a lot of the newer podcasts that ask for guests up front, what they're hoping is actually access to your audience. And, so that's another important delimiter in my head is like, I will show up on your show. You are responsible for promoting it. And if you want me to promote it to my network, to my newsletter list of 100, some odd thousand people, that requires money, right? That's something that, because there's a real opportunity cost there. Every line of text in my newsletter that goes to something else is something that, it depends. It's all value based, right? So there's like Trust Insights ads in the newsletter. If I take that away to give to your podcast, then I'm taking money literally out of my pocket to do so. So I would separate the appearance from the promotion as well. And I got a note before a stream I was on last week saying, "Oh, here's all the things you could do to promote our show." Like, cool. When you pay me, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to show up and chat. And so I think that's an important distinction to make too. Is that there's a difference between appearance and promotion, and don't fall for the trap of leveraging your audience to promote somebody else's show in exchange for no value.
What if you feel like, okay, you've gone on this show, they haven't paid you, and you gave a really stellar interview, you've really highlighted all of the things that you can do, that your company can do, but they haven't paid you? Would you then promote the show in order for people to hear what you have to say?
So it's funny you mentioned that. I'm actually doing something on my personal blog right now that I'm calling 2020 Rewind, because one of the things that shows don't do enough of is they don't make enough use of the media that they've created, the Trust Insights Transmedia framework. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking the audio from shows I've been on this year. I'm running it through our transcription tool, Otter. So go to trustinsights.ai/otter, OTTR. You can see what it does, like the animal otter. And I'm taking those transcripts and I'm putting up blog posts on my blog. I will link to the original show, but I put all the text from the interview on my site, along with a link to the audio file and things like that, so that if it was a really good interview, my site benefits from my own words, right? Because again, a lot of these podcasts don't spend the time or invest the money in the technology to get the 5,000 or 7,000 words of spoken word out. And I want that because it's all topics that are related to what we do. So I would say that's my little fun hack for that is if you got a show out there that you think is good, great, import it and put it on your site. Be careful. I've never had this happen, but it's not too hard to imagine it happening. Somebody saying you can't take our content, put it on your site. Like, well, yeah, then I don't need to be a guest on your show because I am the content. So just be careful of that.
I think that that's also a really good point. And when you're doing your homework, is finding out that information up front, because you don't want to spend all this time, to prepare and, make sure that your points come across eloquently and succinctly, and then find out that you can't do anything with your own content. It's the same sort of idea of, other people taking pictures of you. Just because you're in the picture doesn't mean you own it. The person who took the picture owns it. It's the same thing with, podcasts. Just because you were a guest doesn't mean you own what you said. And so those are really good things to find out ahead of time. Think about, when we used to go to conferences and do speaking engagements, which will come back at some point, but now they're all virtual. Those are questions that we had up front of, if I spend, 5 hours prepping this really good keynote talk, and then I give the keynote talk, and then I spend the time at the conference, do I own that content? Can I reuse it for my own benefit? Or do you now own that? And those are really good questions to ask, especially if you're just getting started out and you have limited resources to create this content. Now, Chris, you and I are sort of in the space where we've done the same talk multiple times. And so if for some reason we had to do a riff on one of those talks that was just for Trust Insights, it wouldn't be that big of a lift. But a couple of years ago, for me, that would have been a big deal, because it would have been the first time I was giving a talk on a certain topic. And so those are just the things that you want to make sure that you're aware of how much of your own content do you own, or are you giving it away to someone else for them to do something with it?
Yep. Yeah, it's important, especially when it comes to talks and conferences, to read the fine print on the contracts very carefully. Like one of the things that we're going to be doing for Trust Insights is taking some of the workshops and stuff that you've done, Katie. You did a couple earlier this year. In the contract, there's a 90-day lockout that said you may not reuse this content for 90 days. And now that once that lockout has expired, then obviously we're free to reuse it. But you got to be careful to make sure that you're not signing away the rights to your own intellectual property. One of the workarounds for that is you publish a talk on your site under your accounts first before you give it, because then you've established pre-existing intellectual property. And almost every contract I've read says, we obviously make no claim to existing intellectual property. And so if what you've got to share is valuable, then obviously you want to try that approach first to make sure that you're legally covered. It's the same as any kind of copyright. You establish evidence of the copyright first, and then you have ownership of it. So to wrap up, look at your data once you've done something to see what's working, and do more of what's working. Any kind of year-end review of any kind, something you want to do there. Set good boundaries that have clear rules that you can defend to somebody else and explain to somebody else, and be really cautious about how you evaluate opportunities. Make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, and that the value exchange is fair. Even if no dollars or pesos or euros exchange hands, it should be value for value if it's a truly equitable trade. If you've got questions about what we've talked about in today's episode, pop on over to our free Slack group, Analytics for Marketers, over at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 1,400 other people can chat about analytics and marketing to your heart's content. And if you're watching this, wherever you're watching this, hop on over to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, where you can subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice. We try and publish it everywhere reasonable. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.